Hello everybody and welcome back, and today we're going to do a relatively short video on the soon to be arriving 0.6.0 patch, which is actually happening tomorrow. So this is going to be kind of important for a lot of you, and I'm going to try my best to keep it somewhat short and concise. So of course the first big change that's happening is commanders. First of all, there's a new skill tree, which I'll get to in a minute, and yes, all of your commanders are going to be reset, so just throwing that out there. So you do have a chance to reskill all your captains. Could be annoying if you have a lot of them, but also could give you a chance to fix some earlier mistakes. And of course the other thing is that now we have elite commander experience. So when your commander hits the 19th point, all the additional experience earned goes into this pool, shall we say, of elite commander experience. And you can use this elite commander experience for things like when you retrain a commander for a new ship. You can use that experience to speed up that retraining if you don't use the balloons, for example. So yeah, it's very, very useful. You can use it, I think, to also reset skills as well, if I remember correctly. So instead of in the past where everything was the balloons, now you do get to use this elite commander experience. The one thing to keep note of here, there's one thing to keep in mind, is that with this sort of new commander system, be careful not to actually use your free experience on your commanders. You do earn commander experience quite a bit faster, especially if you have things like dragon flags and commander EXP flags. So make sure that you just get a 19-point captain and go from there. Be careful not to use your free experience, because free experience is quite a bit more valuable in my opinion. I think from what I remember reading here, there's also a way to convert your elite commander experience as well, at the same rate I think it is for ship experience. But still, you can use your free experience in the same way as the elite commander experience, but it's not really worth it, so be careful not to accidentally spend that. Okay, moving on, of course we have the new commander skills. Now most of the stuff is exactly the same as videos before. There are a few changes that have occurred when it comes to captain skills. So one of them is survivability expert, for example. It's now down to a tier 3 skill, and it's now there's an HP reduction of 350 HP per tier rather than 400. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Another thing, of course, is that fire prevention was buffed a little bit more. It used to be like 7% reduction in the last video. It's now minus 10%. It's still really, really small. The more useful bonus is really that it reduces the maximum number of fire sources by combining the two superstructure ones into a single source. So fire prevention can be kind of useful. One thing to really, I guess, be sort of mindful of, and mind you, NA does actually have this wrong. So let me use the EU notes for a second here. NA made a mistake on this one. So for example, another one of the skills right now is adrenaline rush, for example, right? When I first tested it, it was like 0.1% for each 1% of HP lost. Now it's 0.2. And that's quite significant, because at 50% HP lost, that's already a 10% buff. So think about that for a minute. Pretty interesting skill. Another one that you have to keep in mind is, and where is that skill? It's basically the IFHE skill. There we go, the inertia fuse for HE skill. Now, this skill has been changed quite drastically, and there's a 30% addition increase to your armor penetration of your HE shells. Now, to figure out your HE shell penetration, for pretty much all ships except for German battleships, it is basically 1/6 of your shell size. So what you really want to be thinking about is if you have, let's say, 152 millimeter guns, right? So you go divide by 6, which is figuring out your normal HE pen, and then you multiply by 1.3. And whatever that number is the amount of armor it can penetrate. Now, HE doesn't care about angled armor, it's raw armor thickness, right? So if you've got 32 millimeters of battle armor, let's say on a tier 8 to 10 battleship, 152 millimeter HE with this 1.3 multiplier can penetrate that. Without it, it cannot. So, do the math before you actually get the skill. And also the other changes, it used to be a 6% reduction to chance of fire, now it's only a 3% reduction. So you can counter this 3% reduction by getting Demo Expert, which has also changed. Now it's only a 2% increase. So you can get Demolition Expert, and you can also throw on a normal, let's say, Fire Flag, and you can pretty much get your fire chance back to stock shells as well. So that is something to keep in mind. Other things as well is that direction center for catapult aircraft. This is still pretty useful, I think, on cruisers in my opinion, because cruisers, from what I've seen in the patch notes, don't have their catapult fighters nerfed, but battleships do have it nerfed now, down to 90 seconds from what it used to be like 5-6 minutes. So it's only 90 seconds down for battleships, probably not as useful as a BB. You might want to consider something else, although this is still a viable skill, but just not as great of an effect as when I first tested it in my last video about captain skills. Other things to think about as well, there is actually a very interesting bunch of CV changes as well that could be interesting. So for example, like dogfighting expert. Where is it? Dogfighting expert. So the skill's a very cheap skill now. It's like a level 1 skill, right? And I said that there's better skills to take for CVs, and there still is. But in, you know, while the sort of the power difference to different tiers might not be a big thing, 10% increase to ammo could be quite substantial, especially when you see one of the other modules that has changed as well. So CVs might want to keep an eye out for these increased ammo skills as well, and modules, which I'll get to in a little bit. Moving on, and we have the radio location skill, or RDF, or RPF, radio direction finding, radio position finding. You've probably seen this term on the forums, on Reddit, maybe in other community contributor videos. And the skill's still here, in exactly the same iteration that it was in the first public test. And you know, that's after all the negative feedback, it's still here. Which suggests a couple of things, and again, suggests because I'm guessing here. It suggests that maybe there is some sort of longer term plan that we're just unaware of. And until we see the sort of playing out of this longer term plan, it's a little early to judge whether something is a good or a bad idea. So that might be something. Not 100% sure, but it could be something. There's also a chance that after all the public testing has been done, they still want live test statistics and data on this particular skill. And so regardless of what we do now, you know, nothing might happen. Although I do advise you to try it out on the live servers. And of course, you know, as time goes by, if the skill is really, really a bad idea, petition harder that the skill should go. And if that is the case, you know, after maybe a few more weeks of actual live server testing, it's still a terrible thing, then, you know, we can all jump on the bandwagon, you know, grab the pitchforks and the torches and demand that they get rid of it. And it is a changing game. It is an MMO, and they can add and remove things, you know, depending on, you know, actual, I guess, additional data and additional feedback. But I mean, again, my personal take, I'm still kind of meh about it. I don't really see the skill to be insane. Yes, it's useful. Like, I've had situations where I'm like, oh, that was useful. It was good to have. I've also had a situation where, this was during a stream too, where I was playing a cruiser and I knew there was a destroyer somewhere to the south of me, and it was like, oh, well, he's somewhere there. And it would have been nice in that particular situation to have the skill. But the thing about the skill for me was that it wasn't always useful. It wasn't like, oh yes, I'm using it constantly. It was like, yes, on some specific situations, yes, I saw some use for it. But there were also cases where, you know, in some situations where it was just like, oh, no, this skill did something and I thought it was showing me something that it wasn't. And I got a bit deceived by it. And so I'm a little bit mixed on the skill, right? It's like, I still think it's okay, just because I still think that for a lot of ships, they're going to be more valuable skills to take. But, you know, again, right? Everybody's going to have sort of their own take on it, their own opinion. I mean, I'm going to show you another clip as well, where the skill sort of worked against me as well. Again, don't take any one clip as the answer. It's just another example to keep an eye out and have some knowledge about, you know, this skill and kind of how it works, and maybe the sort of the flaws with the skill as well. But again, I mean, it really is going to be down to more players going into the actual server and testing it out. All right, so this is just an example that I had experienced in PTS about how, you know, this RDF RPF skill can sometimes lead you astray. So right around here, I see this RDF indicator pointing in that direction. Now look at the minimap and I notice that the majority of the enemy team has gone south. My guess at this particular time is, okay, there might be a CV hiding behind that rock. That is an area that CVs like to hide. Suddenly I see an aircraft right there popping up and I'm like, okay, there has to be a CV there because that's a fresh squadron. And as I'm starting to approach, I see the RDF indicator shift. And I'm thinking, okay, the CV is starting to run south. So you can see that I immediately turn my ship to try to cut him off and try to catch up to him. And then I get spotted. And what I actually got spotted by is actually this destroyer. And up until pretty much that very second where I got spotted, and even then my brain had to process, like, how am I getting spotted? I wasn't aware there was a destroyer there. So had this destroyer been active, now luckily for me in this particular battle he was AFK, but had this destroyer been active, that would have been a bit of a nasty shock. All of a sudden you've got something there that's ready to fight you that you weren't expecting. So of course, AFK destroyer, we do kill this destroyer, and of course once we kill the destroyer, I mean the CV was where I thought he was. So again, I mean, this is just a small example. I mean, it's not the perfect one to say, yes, RDF is good or bad. It's just another sort of example to put within that frame of discussion. Another change that's occurred in this particular patch is that the scale for experience has changed, right? So how much experience you used to require to get one skill point and what it is now has changed a little bit. So it's now, if I've read the sort of description properly, to get up to the 18th point, it's actually going to be cheaper now than it was before, requiring only just over 1.4 million experience to get up to your 18th point, while it used to require 1.54 million. However, the earlier skill points are more expensive now. So if you take a look down here, so before 0.6.0, to get your first skill point was only 1,200, then it was 1,300, 1,500, and pretty much up till your 13th skill point, it was going to be cheaper on 0.6.0. Now it's going to require 1,500, 2,500, 4,000, 6,000, 9,000, so on and so forth experience to get those commanders to those same skill points. However, once you get past the 13th point, by the time you try to go to your 14th point, the current 0.6.0 patch that's coming is going to be cheaper. You're only going to need 132,000, which used to require 136,000, and of course that difference only gets more significant. By the 19th point, only 300,000, well, okay, I mean versus 10 million, right? But okay, 18th point there, 259,000 versus 369,000. It's quite a big difference there. All right, and in terms of little things, first cool thing that I noticed is that they are adding a commander image, a US commander portrait that actually looked like someone who passed away. So, Marco, don't know who you are, never met you, but it's good to see that you're going to be immortalized in this game forever. Other little things, Marblehead guns got corrected. Okay, that's kind of small. They had a couple of exterior changes where they changed some things, so that's all not super important. There's a couple of new camos that are coming. The big, really sort of the next big thing is, well, first of all, Nagato and Namagi, no more A hull, thank God. Now you're going to go straight to the B hull, so that's great. Yeah, so I mean, it's going to be all things equal to the B hull except for HP and rotor shift time, right? And so it's going to just be that A and that B hull. So that's going to be good, thank God. If you've researched the B hull, the Nagato, before the update was released, they'll automatically receive the C hull, so there we go. I mean, you'll be fine. And let me see what else is there. Oh yes, Bismarck's hydroacoustic search now has become standard tier 8 hydroacoustic. So the German hydro that used to be on the Bismarck is now gone. So that's a bit of a nerf to the Bismarck, and it's an interesting one. We'll see how it plays out, but I think it is a necessary one. The Bismarck right now is a little bit overpowering. Again, I mentioned earlier the catapult fighter, that has been decreased for battleships to 90 seconds. Another thing, of course, they said that shell flight times have been fixed. Some of the ships were displaying incorrect shell flight times. They're fixing that. For CVs, there are two interesting modules. One of them is Flight Control Mod 1, and the other one's Air Groups Mod 2. Now, Flight Control Mod 1 used to give a 10% reduction to servicing time. Now it's 15%. So for aircraft with long servicing times, this could be quite helpful. Air Groups Mod 2, in addition to the 20% bonus to fighter HP, now they increase their ammo count by 50%. So these are interesting changes. I mean, you know, for example, as a Japanese CV, for example, do you want even faster servicing? Or do you want your fighters to now have additional ammo to strafe with? What about the US ones, right? The US squadrons take a long time to service. Would it be better to have them up faster? Or would you rather have even more ammo? Considering US CV's fighters already have tons of ammo, do you really want more? And then, of course, how do all of these interact with that dogfighting expert skill that gave plus 10% fighter ammo that I mentioned earlier? That particular change, plus with these two modules, pretty interesting stuff. Aside from that, Marblehead has been slightly buffed. Akazuki's armor pen, that's just been corrected to what it's supposed to be. Infobuki's smokescreen was a little bit reduced. So, not huge changes. The most significant ones I've sort of talked about already. Oh yes, and then of course clans. Whoopee, they're finally coming. We're gonna get clans, and yes, I'm probably gonna be starting one as well. So right now, what's gonna happen is I think the limit for each clan is gonna be 30 members. Creating the clan is gonna cost you 2,500 doubloons. I mean, the doubloon cost is, I don't know. I'm a little, I don't know. I wish there was an alternative means, maybe for the F2P players. Maybe just to create with a large amount of credits instead of doubloons. Although 2,500 doubloons really isn't as expensive. I think if you divide it out between a whole bunch of clan members, it might not be so much. But again, anyway, just sort of, I guess, pointing that out. And basically, it's going to be a social thing first. You're just going to get a clan. You're going to be able to have a tag, and you're going to be able to see like the statistics of your clan members and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's there. You're going to get a clan name. Nothing's going to be reserved, to my knowledge. I checked it up on the NA forums. One of the Wargaming staff has come out and said, no names are reserved. You just got to get on at that time and sign up. That's going to be how it goes. Mutsu is being tested, so that's a battleship that's coming. That's basically an A-hull Nagato at tier 6. So we'll see how that goes. And that's pretty much it. I mean, there's a couple of minor fixes here, a couple of minor bug fixes. And I don't think there's anything else really of note, to be honest. Yeah, nothing else really of note here. But, overall, pretty interesting patch that's coming. A lot of interesting changes, a lot of interesting things to keep an eye out for. And we'll see how it all plays out in the game. Again, if you have any opinions, questions, comments about these changes, post them in the comments section below. Anyways, guys, take care. Have a good one. And I'll talk to all of you again really, really soon.